Okay, guys. Well, we've got war on, so we thought we'd have a look at a couple of issues, and it was interesting. Whilst we're trying to set things up, Peter and I were having this discussion about things, and there's no precise wrong or right way to communicate. The important thing in written communication is that it's your style. It's you. Don't try and be me. Don't try and be classmatic. Be who you are. But beyond that, there are some things that are fairly universal. So I know I talked last week and last war about the fact when you're writing a legal report, it's important that you present the evidence and then explain why you get there. So it'll help you go through that stage if I have a look at a report that I'm actually in the process of writing, and I've depersonalized it so that my client's confidentiality is kept. But apart from that, and it's by no means a finished report, it just goes to look at the things that you need to think about. And insert and share. So whilst this opens up, and it should be sharing, there it is. Okay. We'll get to a big size screen in a few seconds. That's only at 93. That's probably as big as you want. Okay, so it's got a standard title page. A copyright release, guys. This is something that we haven't talked about, but it might be worthwhile talking about. I had a past student call me only last week and said, Mark, I've just found a whole pile of my report in somebody else's report. Has anyone else had that as an experience at all ever?
Yep.
Yep. Yep. Big chunks. What you write is covered by copyright. So, the student called the person that had copied stuff and talked to him about it and said, don't do it again. And he was all apologetic and said he'd fix it up straight away. So I already tell people what's going to happen. I'm amazed at how much, when I tell them that it's going to cost them $440 a page per page or part thereof of this document. In other words, you copy a paragraph, it's $440. Thanks very much for each and every time you use it, and we will invoice you, and you will pay. And since then, we've had no troubles with it. And there's a problem that arises from copyright when you're writing a report. Some clients want the copyright, and you've got to be careful in terms of signing over the copyright that you're not signing over the copyright to the template that's underlying. And so a template's there ready and stuff. You don't want to give that away. You know, if I signed over my copyright, then I'd lose this. I'd have to rewrite this whole section. You know, I couldn't.
Is that why you use that license to use?
Yeah, so I give them a license, say it's for that purpose. You can use it to your heart's content. But if you want to start reproducing things outside of that, you've got to come and ask me. And I do get people even in the reviewing process that say, "Can I do it?" And I say, "No, you're reviewing it for the purpose of that site, that project. Then it's all yours to go ahead with." But it just gets the copyright stuff out up front.
Could you give us an example of what sort of circumstances would want someone to use your own document?
The government often believes that it needs ownership and copyright, but it only needs copyright of the information that relates to that site, not, it doesn't need the copyright in my copyright release. I don't want to have to rewrite that. Everything you write is automatically by law in Australia copyrighted. You don't have to go out and put it in a safe or get a copyright expert to do it. Just simply writing it makes it copyright in Australia. And that's one part of it. There's another thing called moral rights, and that's another interesting thing. So if you're working for me, Vicky, and you write a report and take some photographs, I can't say that I took those photographs. I can't say photograph Mark Hartley. I have to give moral rights. That is, I can't not do it. We can choose not to have anything, but I can't take Vicky's moral rights. So moral rights means an employee also has rights. So when you're working for an employer, there's that component as well. Copyright, the sort of things that someone would copy is that exact whole thing. They just go copy, paste, and put it in a document. And what you're meant to do is use that for inspiration. And you should be reading arborist reports, and you should be looking for things that match up what you do. And I'll show you one of those if you want. That again, the young Phil Whitten, the same arborist. I said to Phil, look, you know, that's what he needs to do. He needs to have some form of release that says what happens when they break the copyright. And Rob, that's why you want it in writing. It's if you break it, we're not even going to argue about the value of it. You can say, oh, I thought it was only worth 40 cents. Well, no, you already knew what it was going to be. It's $440 a page. There's no argument about what we call quantum at that point in time. So, and that's where most of your time is wasted in a court case. Whereas here, it's nice and simple and sweet. You've elected to use it. And you suffer the consequences. But yes, just something that lets them know that it's your document. It is by law regardless, but I think it's worthwhile saying that you have copyright in the document. So I think
I've always just relied on that, you know, legal copyright.
The doctrine of copyright, yes. Look, and that's fine.
I can't say that I've had a huge amount of difficulty with it. It has happened to me, but a long time ago, and kind of only with the one person. That's not happened again.
And I think that's probably it, Peter. It's not going to be a regular occurrence, but then most arborists consulting arborists are fairly ethical, most. So what you'd hope that it wouldn't happen. But I'll protect the guilty by saying I was at a function a number of years ago, and an arborist, young upstart of an arborist, came up to me and said, "Oh, look, I've loved the internet. You get all this useful stuff off it." And like what? He says, I've got this document called POTOX, which was Protection of Trees on Construction Sites. He said, and he said, I included in all my reports. I said, well, what do you think the copyright owner would say? Oh, well, they don't know, they're in Canberra. I said, well, actually, the copyright holders in Sydney, the company that's got it on their website, asked for permission to put it on their website. So they're in Canberra. And you're breaching my copyright. And yeah, it does have an impact because, you know, it takes time. I had a colleague say to me the other day, he said, oh, can I just swipe your template? I said, well, you can swipe the, you know, the layout and those sort of things. He said, oh, it's all the wording. It's just so hard to do that whole process. He said, I'm going to be at it for a week to do a school report template. And I said to him, yeah, but you got to understand the time that takes me to do that, and it's constant improving and upgrading. And I said to him, would you be interested in paying me $50 a time you use it? He said, done. And so essentially, if he'd stolen that, would have been stealing off me in that case. He cut a check for $1,100 straight away. I thought that was just really neat that, you know, I'm now rewarded for all that time I've put in.
So, Mark, somebody wants to write reports the same way as you write them. Is that what you're saying?
Well, they want to use, everyone writes differently, but there's bits and pieces, and I'll share that when we get to it, Peter. What he wanted was a lot of the appendices and the fluff and the fill and the information, and
that does take a long time to work up and get right and suit you. So
and edit and go back through, and those of you who don't know, my exciting New Year's Eve activity is usually editing my template.
I was just momentarily astounded that somebody would want their reports to read like yours. That's all.
Yeah, no, I understand that, Peter. And look, some of my reports are changing in their style again, trying to simplify things down and try and freshen and brighten things up more. So I am working towards that, just haven't got there yet. So let's go down to...
Before you move on, what about all those arborists who copy great chunks out of the Australian Standard into their reports.
They're breaching copyright unless they apply for a license, and the license is fairly cheap.
I hate that, Rob. It just seems like a whole heap of rubbish fill that has no place in a report.
Absolutely.
Padding, so.
Except sometimes there's useful stuff there for the.
But if you want that useful stuff, then zone in on it and rewrite it in your own words.
Yeah, and that's my view. And if you want the drawings, redraw them. Somebody like Vicky will scribble it out with bloody no time with a bit of software. And I have to say, working with and the new standard draft standard comes out sometime later this week or early next week for 4970. But we'd say to the coordinator, and Nat would say, Nat, could you please change this image? We want it more like this. And the following morning, you'd have this, completely redrawn image. And you think, my, how wonderful that somebody can do it that quickly. Whereas I'm still drawing stick figures, unfortunately. So yes, look, Rob, you can get a license, and the license is really cheap. I mean, proportionally. So if you're going to copy chunks, apply for the license. I agree with Peter that in most cases you need to interpret the standard. You need to write specifications following the standard. The process is not that you want to give a whole chunk of the standard out there. But if you're artistic like I am, having somebody that does that drawing would be great. Of course, if you really want to do it and you're not artistic, you can talk to someone like Vicky, or you can just get online on something like Upwork and ask a graphic artist to restylize it. Really inexpensive to get done. If it's something you're going to use time and time again. And so your templates are one of your most valuable assets as an arborist. If I'm going to do a school report, it might only be 4 or 5 pages of body of material. Half of that 4 or 5 pages is already pre-written, probably 2/3 of that's pre-written. And then there's a whole pile of just appendices that are just there. And they, again, you've got to continue to update them, because for every attempt you make to communicate the best that you can, there's still room for improvement. Unless you're a genius, someone like Dr. Zeus. But for the average arborist, we're not. So I look at what I've written. At least once a year, I edit every single part of the template. That's my New Year's Eve reward. And it's my reward. It's where I get to say, have I improved? If I can't improve on it, then I haven't improved. And hopefully between, a 12-month period as an arborist, I should be improving. And, we improve from experiences as well, learning to put into a report for schools that, you should expect tree branches to drop. Why? Because I hate it when they call me and say, the tree branch has dropped. Yeah, we told you that was going to happen. Stop worrying. Instead of, you need to come out here immediately. There's a branch on the ground, and you get there. And I was saying to Peter, I went to one today where the branch was 40 mils in diameter. I'm thinking, yes, I guess we could have picked that up and beaten little Johnny to death with it. But, he might have got a stitch if he got hit with the tip, coming down tip first. A lot of ifs. The reality is it fell, hit the ground, and no one got hurt. That's what happens with almost all branches that drop. So very rare that we get hit by a falling branch. More likely to get killed by a falling tree. That's a whole nother deal. So again, I've got a standard template for a legal report, and they're numbered paragraphs. And I know we've talked about this before. The reason that they're numbered paragraphs is so that anyone can refer to the paragraph fairly quickly. So it makes it easier for those that are involved in the legal process.
If you've ever had a report looked at in the Environment Court where it wasn't numbered, then you soon change to numbering them, because it's so laborious to refer to that part of the report if it's not numbered.
Yeah, page 17, the third paragraph. No, the third full paragraph. Yes, that's the one. Yes, starting with the words.
Yeah.
And so, yes, it does make sense. And it also makes it easier for both sides to review and see where things are at. So, and so we have the standard sort of things that need to be in a legal report in compliance with the code of conduct. So there's a code of conduct, expert witness code of conduct in every state in Australia. And so I've attached my CV. And in addition to the CV, there's some other bits and pieces I've done, and I'll vary them depending on the
I
report.
didn't realise that you were the education chair for VOS committee, Mark.
Sorry?
I didn't realise that you were the education committee chair.
For 17 years, Peter.
All right.
Yeah. And glad not to be there. So then the documents that we're talking about, then there's a brief, and I'll enclose or attach the full letter of instruction. And they're obligated to do that, but I'll still attach it so there's no confusion. So I've been asked to address three things: as a discussion as to whether the alleged damage was caused by the subject tree, including whether there's any direct evidence of each aspect of further damage being caused by the subject tree, the likelihood that each of the alleged further damage was caused by the subject tree, discussion as to any other alleged damage has been or could have been caused by anything other than the subject tree, and any other matters that are relevant. So I'm going to answer those directly. So I've got a method of what I've done. I've just gone out to the site and inspected. And you can see that's by no means a finished report. It's just at the early stage. I've got to have it finished by Friday. So I have another day and a half in the office. And so I've taken that brief and I've split it to answer the questions. So I want to be really clear. So based on the preliminary inspection, I formed the opinion that roots from the tree had not caused the damage and were unlikely to have contributed to the damage. Well, there's an opinion. What have I got to do if I've got an opinion, Peter?
Substantiate it.
Yeah, I've got to explain what I'm relying on for that. So the question is, there is no direct evidence that the further damage being claimed was caused by the tree. There were no roots visible and no evidence that any investigation had been carried out to locate any roots. So how do I know that tree roots have done it? Now, maybe they could have done, but there's no direct evidence. So that was one of the questions you see here, a well-worded brief by a law firm, a direct evidence, not indirect evidence. But then I discuss indirect evidence. When a tree root cracks concrete, it does so by applying pressure through secondary growth, thickening of the root. This secondary growth of a root exerts pressures in order of a megapascal. And I need to put a citation there. My citation, Peter, will be?
I think that's Biddle, isn't it?
It's Cramer McLeod or the guy out of the UK. No, I just can't think of his name at the moment. So this is sufficient to lift light structures. Once the structure has yielded to the roots, it'll continue to yield to ongoing secondary growth. In the case of an overlying structure, yielding means the structure is displaced vertically, it's lifted. However, there's no evidence of lifting of the driveway, and there appears to be no lifting of the garage floor. In addition, the path on 9 Nelson Street is much closer to where the tree was located, is much lighter, and yet there's no obvious cracking or displacement. On the other hand, many of the concrete slabs further to the south than the concrete slabs of concern have cracked. This suggests that the cause of damage to the other driveway slabs is likely to be some other cause. Again, needs to be cleaned up because I've got cause and cause. It gets confusing. You want to try and avoid repetitious words. If there are alternate explanations for if there are alternate explanations for these other cracks on the driveway, it is reasonable to assume the same explanations didn't cause the. Assume that these same explanations should be may have. caused the damage that is now the subject of this report. In other words, if the driveway next door gets cracked, why is it not the same? So some of the other explanations, and I looked at what other things may have contributed to it. Then again, the next part of it. So you break it down bit by bit. And I mean, it's that old saying, how do you eat an elephant? One mouthful at a time. Okay. And so you want to get what you're dealing with and break it down. Now, very raw, and once the matter's over, I'm happy to share the whole thing in detail, and you'll see how going over the report, all I'm doing now is getting ideas down. I'm not writing a refined report. I'll have to go back and rewrite sentences and rewrite paragraphs and move paragraphs around. I've already started to do that. There's already been a couple of paragraphs that have been shifted and a couple of paragraphs that have been rewritten, and that'll happen 3 or 4 times. I am not one of those J.K. Rowling gifted people that can sit down and write something that reads beautifully to start off with. You know, there are some arborists that are like that. Adam Tom's a little bit more like that. Catriona McKenzie is a really nice writer. She's got a very nice style. But for the bulk of us, it's hard work. And so the likelihood that each of the aspects of the alleged further damage was caused by the subject tree, and again, I've said it's highly unlikely.
Just not wanting to get into the weeds, but what about the soil plasticity? The clay, is the soil clay? Do we know what sort of soil it is? Could the roots be drying?
Even sand can become plastic in the right conditions. You get liquefaction, and it's very movable. But yes, there is some clay content in it. And again, I don't know which of these have. You know, I'm not there to determine the cause. I'm there to determine, are tree roots the cause? And because I'm not getting lifting of the slab, it seems to me fairly unlikely that it's the cause. As a little aside, and one of those things I get to discuss further down, we're not going to go down there. The tree had been pruned, and they'd taken about half the canopy off over the adjoining property, and all of a sudden the adjacent wall tilts very rapidly, and the arborist that inspects the tree, I've not seen the tree at all, the tree's been removed. The arborist that inspects the tree says the tree's failed, it's moved in the ground. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, this is just Mark thinking, so what stopped the tree from falling over? Could it have been the slab on the wall that it's lifted? My thought is, yeah, quite easily. So it may well be that the cause of the damage was wind causing the tree to fail, in which case it shouldn't even be a dispute between neighbours dispute, because under Robson v. Leskey, you know, unless somebody knew or should have reasonably known that the tree was unstable, storm causes it to fail, and that's the end of it. And for both Rob and Niels, it's
somebody pruned the tree, and that contributed to the tree fail.
That's right. That's what I'm saying. Pruning and wind means that it can only go away from where it's going because it's lost a whole part of the canopy, and it's failed away from where the pruning was done, and so that could be a contributing factor. And again, I don't know. All I can do is speculate. But it's reasonable to speculate, provided you say, I don't know. So that's the idea of the thing. You know, are there pipes there? Yes. Have they got problems with the pipes? Yes. They've actually talked about that. So I don't know whether that's contributed to it. It's in the front. You can actually drive a semi-trailer off the road onto these driveways. They're just one after another, after another, after another, right beside each other. So it's a big step. So could someone drive a truck on there to turn it around? Yeah, I don't know. Was the concreting done correctly? I don't know. Is the Rio mesh in the right spot? I don't know. I own a little unit on the beachfront down in Sydney, and they started to do some renovations and repairs in the unit, and they said, oh, 3 of your balconies have Rio mesh in it. They don't have Rio bar. And one of them's ready to fall off. That was the way the builder built it. mind-boggling. Oh, we don't have Rio Bar, we'll just put Rio Mesh in, and they find out about it in 60 years' time when the balcony drops off. Well, that's bad luck, isn't it? I won't be around. So we don't know what the story is here. The question wasn't determine what the cause is. The question is bring to bear your expertise. My expertise says that when roots break a piece of concrete, it starts to lift. It doesn't stay level. And so that's the first problem I've got. The second problem is it's a fair distance away, and why then what caused the other slabs to break that are even further away, some other cause. And it's that lovely little phrase that I found on the arborist site many years ago that said, a structural engineer said that when there are trees present, trees are usually the cause of the damage, but when no trees are present, something else is the cause. And it's just an illogical fallacy. It amuses me then. It amused me then. It still amuses me today. Yes, trees must be the cause. No trees. Well, we'll go find the cause. And this is certainly one of them. So there's lots of things there, but it just gives you the idea of how things are laid out. That's the purpose of this. Try and make sure. So you notice here where I'm quoting what the brief is, I've changed the color so it stands out. Okay, not the best color. I'm not a design person. Look what I'm wearing. I'm wearing my usual regimented black. So, black and white does well for me, but I do need help on occasions getting out of that mold. So hopefully that helps you get the idea of, so opinion, underlying assumptions, and how you get there. There's no good just saying, it's my opinion that the tree roots haven't lifted the driveway. I've got to do more than that. Okay, so what's the underlying science? Trees exert pressure. That pressure means that as the root continues to grow, it must lift somewhere. It can't not lift and break the root, break something. And theoretically it could, but it's really unlikely. It's really unlikely when it's gone under 2 footings and gone 7 or 8 or so meters, when a path that's 3 meters away hasn't even been touched at all. So, and that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying it couldn't have. It's just of my opinion that it didn't. So
this is one neighbour taking another neighbour to Land and Environment Court.
It's a really weird one. This is an insurance company who's paid out the damage to the neighbouring company, neighbouring strata, the non-tree owner. So the tree owner's company is paid out, and then they've come back for a second bite of the cherry and said, well, it's also damaged these things. In the process, I'm saying, well, you probably shouldn't have paid the first time round. You probably should have gone to the Land and Environment Court the first time and had them make a decision rather than paying out, what is relatively big amounts of money. I think there's, more than $20,000 worth of damage on the first instance, and now they're trying to claim for another 20. And, it needs to go to the Land and Environment Court, or they need to come to an agreement. And hopefully a well-written document. So I'm writing here not just to a David Galway or John Douglas type of consulting arborist who understands tree. I'm writing to insurance company people that don't understand trees at all. And so I've got to be able to communicate that complexity, because ideally one of the insurance parties will open up and say, oh, crap. And the other one will open up and say, oh, crap. The tree owners will say, perhaps we shouldn't have paid out. And the neighbouring property will say, yeah, we haven't got a case in hell. We're not going to run it in court. And the best court cases are those that never run. And to do that, you've got to present the evidence clearly enough that a legal person, and they're really good with words, so it's still got to be you, but it's got to be precise, that a legal person can read it and say, yeah, I'm going to be screwed trying to argue against that. Or a legal person opens it and reads it and says, yep, I'd like to see somebody argue with that. That's a well thought out, well communicated, logical progression. This is going to be a lay down for us. And they're the positions you want to be in, ideally.
So there was no opportunity to do an investigation to find roots.
Not my job, Rob. Mark, we'd like to engage you to work with a structural engineer to determine the cause of failure of the overlying concrete and what to do about it to prevent it from happening again. I'm in for that. We've got a budget of maybe $35,000-$40,000 and we'll go for it. Mike, the question was, did the roots cause it? Based on the evidence before me, no. Now, it's up for you as the other side now, Rob. You're on the non-tree owners, you're the neighbour. It's up for you to say, well, let me open up the concrete. Now, I've been through this process. I opened up the concrete slab, said, there's a fig root. It's right underneath where the crack was. It runs in the direction that the crack is directing. It's lifted the whole floor by about 5 centimetres. The root itself is about 8 centimetres in diameter. So, you know, everything fits together, but you should still get a structural engineer to, you know, go through and check for that. In that one, it was interesting. The court said they felt that it probably was, but there were probably other contributing factors and nobody had gone through and looked at those. Like, was there appropriate Rio mesh? Was it appropriate thickness of slab? All those things had been ignored. And that's, again, that's not my field of expertise. I know enough about concrete. I've got some experience with concrete. Niels, would you agree I've got experience with concrete?
Probably you've got a lot outside your shed there.
Yeah, that's all my handiwork. There's
Good
thousands of
effort.
cubic meters there, unfortunately. So yes, there's you know, I understand what concrete does and how it does it, but it's because people also talk to me. So my structural engineer and I have a structural engineer I use on a regular basis. John's coming to me one day when I asked him to determine whether the roots had contributed to it, and I do all the calculations. He makes me do them so that I learn. And I said, so does it cause cracks? He said, we need to define what a crack is. He said, when concrete dries, it almost inevitably has microfractures all the way through it. So that's why we put Rio mesh in it. That's why the Romans had invented concrete 2,000 years beforehand, but it wasn't until we came up with a material that we could mix with it that gave it tensile strength that it became useful. And, you know, again, I'm not an expert, so I would like to say something about it having microfractures, and I've got more experience than most people with concrete, which does make me an expert, but it doesn't make me a proper expert in the process. So I could give evidence in that regard, and I'd have to explain why, based on having poured or worked with a few thousand cubic meters of concrete, I understand what's involved with concrete.
Can I ask a concrete question with trees?
Yep.
I've got a site out at Warwick Farm, industrial site, and the encroachment of the new driveway with guttering goes over the structural roots out of the tree.
Yeah, go on.
Can you peer between the trees? I've seen it done with driveways and then lay over the top, slightly elevated.
Yeah, or you can go on grade.
You can go on grade.
You can go on grade, but what you have to be aware of is that root's going to keep on growing.
Yeah,
And
so you need to give like at least 100 mil clearance for the roots.
Well, if you give 100 mils clearance, I'd rather you have it on the grade and have it 150 mils and some piers in to hold the slab down so that it never gets lifted and never gets affected by the tree roots. That would be my preference.
Okay. Wouldn't it crack over time?
No, not if it's properly constructed. Think about it. Have you been over a concrete bridge?
Yep.
The same time as the semi-trailer's going over it and
Yep.
it didn't break? That's bearing a lot of weight. Or you go down to Mascot Airport and you watch a plane land, something like a Boeing 747. I
Yeah.
mean, that's going to come in with an unladen weight of 300 and something or other ton.
So the formed gutter would have rebar through it.
Yeah, rare mesh. You'd probably be only meshing, and you'd probably be, again, a structural engineer should design this, but
Yeah,
somewhere between 32 and 42 MPa concrete. You could get down as thin as 100, but you'd usually want a thickened edge, so 125 to 150 on the edge, and you can put it over a fig root system, and the fig root system can never lift it. It starts to flatten. It starts to deform. Eventually, it may kill the top side of that, but that's okay. Trees have lots of roots. And if it starts to kill off one section, it'll develop roots elsewhere. It's a very slow and gradual process.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
So, no, the dilemma is the cracking of it. And that's, James Urban says, and again, I'll read it to you, and I'll tell you what section of it comes from. Urban. I'll just open it up now. It's my standard references. Thought I could open it up immediately. But James Urban suggests that even simply 6 inches by itself of concrete may be sufficient in terms of mass. It's about getting enough mass. And the idea of putting piers in isn't to separate it from concrete paving up by roots. Okay. The phrase says, concrete has limited, this is from James Urban, up by roots, page 271.
Yeah, I've got that book.
Yep. So I'm giving you the page reference, 271. Concrete has limited ability to move, and it shears at joints or cracks, leaving sharp changes in paving elevations. Oh, well, I could quote that for what I've just said. This is the primary conflict between trees and paving in cities. The typical 4 inches of unreinforced concrete sidewalk is no match for tree roots. The concrete can be made thicker and reinforced, but this increases the cost and makes repairs more difficult. Enough concrete and steel can withstand the pressure of a tree root. Reinforced concrete, 6 inches thick or greater, may be required. Research is underway to determine the minimum strength necessary to withstand root pressures. Concrete has 2 significant advantages over other paving surfaces. While it may appear to seal off water from reaching the soil, it also stops evaporation from the underside of the paving. So all the negatives we get about it, there are some positives. And a number of years ago, about 6 or 7 years ago, we had a fairly big drought, and I had the opportunity to go out with students and look at trees. And one of the things we've observed, and we've got photographs of, is trees in turf performing significantly worse than trees in concrete openings. And it's simply, turf is far more efficient at taking water out than trees, so it outcompetes. And it really is amazing. You don't think about plants killing each other, but they do. There's a warfare there. And my favorite one is the park at St Mary's had a whole pile of Eucalyptus microcorys, Pterodocornis, and Casuarina glauca planted around the perimeter of the park. And during that drought, all of a sudden the bark started coming off all the microcorys, and it was coming off. Of course, the cockatoos were coming in and going after the longicorn that had come in en masse, because all the microcorys failed within about a 6-week period. The Pterodocornis just kept going. It literally outcompeted to death. And so that happens all the time. One of the big limiting factors, it's not always the worst, but one of the big limiting factors is water. And for all the negative of concrete, it's got positives. And it's better than bitumen because I can have concrete above grade if I need to. I can feather an edge so there's not a trip hazard. I can't do that with bitumen because that edge is going to be weakened.
I think I remember seeing some concrete, I don't know what it's called, that actually allowed water to.
No fines concrete.
Yeah, but it's got problems. And so there's all these, often that's done to fit into a drainage system that's built underneath the hard surface. So then they'll have a drainage system going through, and that means trenching, which you don't want. And part of the way that a bitumen road works is the bitumen layer, or the asphalt if you're so inclined, is excluding the water. Once you get cracks, and that's why you see them going along and sealing the cracks. Once you get water in, then it starts to fail. And so you want to try and avoid that plasticity issue again. Now, you can avoid that plasticity by engineering your slab appropriately. And then in that case, you could actually drill holes all the way through. You get a guy with a core to go in and drill holes and fill it up with pea gravel and let it drain to your heart's content. Again, that's the job of a structural engineer. Of course, it's not what they normally do. So it's very much a left field thinking, and they panic. They say, but it's not in the computer program. It's not in the textbook. But if you walk them through it, they can work it out. And we've done it on a number of occasions. And they say, oh, yeah, okay, that makes sense now. So that's a legal report. Any other questions on a legal report? It's got, same sort of things in it, bits and pieces, definitions. And if the definition is not being used, you need to eliminate it, take it out. I have to give the expert witness code of conduct. I include it to show that that's the version I read, a CV, and again, it needs to be the most up-to-date one that you can. So I've got that in there. And supporting images, so the photographs that I'm using, and I think you already know now I'm using I get as close as I can to A5 images there, a little bit smaller than A5 because they've got to fit in the page, but 2 images to a page is now my rule. Sometimes I'll do one whole image to the page, but 4 and 5 images, they're just so hard to see. And Niels, you don't get this, but as you get older, seeing things gets so much harder. The rest of us are sitting there saying, yep, we agree. So you want to avoid that problem.
I've got sawdust in my eyes. I can't see anything.
Well, you end up developing a second eyelid. So you can see there's the printing that they did from that to that.
Wow.
What's interesting is the wall went from that wall there went from almost vertical to rapidly leaning. So it and the arborist that saw, and I don't know what sort of an arborist, I don't know whether it's good or what, but they're complaining about cracking there and cracking in here, but there's cracking there, there's cracking there, there's cracking there, there's cracking here, but the pathway that comes up through here, there's no cracking. So it doesn't make sense that it's gone underneath that footing, and then all of a sudden come up. Could it do it? Yeah. It's not an impossibility, but it's an improbability. And legal stuff is always decided on the balance of probabilities when it comes to civil matters, not beyond all reasonable doubt. So the other one I thought I'd talk to you about is just getting the style for you and trying to get things to communicate to multiple target audiences. And so, again, I'll share with you. So this is a template. The template's just been started. Again, I'll go in and I'll zoom that up a bit for you so it's easy to see. Yellow stuff means that I need to do something with it. I've got the references there already. Yellow stuff, do I need to do it? And then this is how I deal with the trees that I find. Tree 1, and now this is something that we've only just started to do recently. But I don't know what it is. Let's say it's a eucalyptus. Let's say it's a grey box. Then it's already done in the right format for me. Yeah, you can tell I can't type. When I go to do that, it's got to be Eucalyptus mollicana, and you'll notice it's automatically going to italicize. And you can do this with your software, can't you, Peter? Now that, have I dropped out? No, you got your mic off, Peter.
I'm not sure that I can in the same way as you're doing it. I think that I can, but not like this.
And this is that little problem I was telling you about that Grammarly is doing at the moment. If you're using Grammarly in Word, it wants to continually override even when you go up and say, don't run Grammarly until I tell you to, it still wants to run it whilst you're doing it. It still wants to use it. So I'm going to say something like this tree has a dead branch greater than 15 cm in diameter. And thank goodness it can figure these things out for me. And that's a sentence, nice and simple. That's the thing I'm worried about. Then recommendations, what do I suggest? 15 it was meant to be, not 1C15. So I'm going to say remove dead branch. So that's great. And then I'll say typically, so that there's no confusion, as a part of general property maintenance or as a part of general tree maintenance. So I don't want them to think that you've got to remove it because it's a risk if the risk is not in that range that's unacceptable or that range that's not tolerable, and they'll are. So I'll deal with the trees that deal with that. And again, I've set it up so I can put quick parts in, so I can insert bits and pieces if I want to go more of them. That's just a standard thing that's right up the front in terms of trees and wind. It just says, don't let kids out during strong windy weather. I've got a video there that just shows them what that looks like when you see a 50-kilometre-hour wind. So they've got a visual to go to as well. Who's reading this bit, do you think?
Well, hopefully the school principal.
Yeah, but the guy that's doing the tree work probably doesn't give a damn about it. And the guy who's making the decisions to spend the money in some little office somewhere, again, he does not care either. So that's just some bits and pieces there. Now, this is a summary of it. This is where my administration person, and so we've got tree one, we said what it is, Control I, it's a eucalyptus. I'm using a one that hasn't been started so that there's no confidentiality issues.
I can see what you're doing. Yeah, this having fields that you can fill. Yeah. The word processor I use is that.
So dead branch. Then because we're going to run out of space, greater than 10 cm in diameter, Alt 157. And there we are. So then work recommended, remove dead branches 10 cm in diameter and larger. I don't have to say it's a part of general tree maintenance here now because I've already got that in the reporty part of it. This is just a summary so someone can look at it. And we use in our numbering system, we use a date or a year prefix. And I've still got trees on schools that we've been looking at now for more than 8 or 9 years. We're just monitoring. So that's going to be maintenance. The next one might be monitoring. So we'll say monitor and so on. And so they've got a quick summary. And then the next stage will become the pictures. And I've talked to you about this before. If you're using Word, there is nothing easier than just clicking right click, change picture, and from the clipboard, you have to get something into the clipboard. I'll just grab something now so you can see that it's doable. Come on, clip. Okay, it's because I'm in the wrong page.
What about the cake that he's been eating, Mark?
It's a plum. And it'll just let you see. Oh, come on. Why won't you let me grab it? Yep, now I've got it. Okay, copy. So I've copied it to my clipboard. I found a picture, and now I'm going to put it in. So in here now, change, and then straight from clipboard. In doing that, that's I just took it off a screenshot. Now that's got everything. All my margins are where I want them. I've got the height the way I want. Everything fits in. It just simply adjusts everything for you.
Can you go through that again?
Yep. So set up a template. This is a template. This is Elena Grace, my youngest granddaughter. And I simply got everything set up on one cell and then just copied it. Copy that cell and copy that cell and copy that cell. When I want to change the picture, right click and then change picture and then from clipboard. So you just save the image to clipboard and then it just pastes straight in for you. Now, if you set it up and you crop this, I'll get into trouble if I save this now. So I crop this down there. I've got a really thin picture. Let me go thinner. Now if I change from clipboard, it'll crop the picture to the same proportions. So you want it all set up to have a full picture go in from clipboard. And now we've got a cropped picture instead. So you set up the picture with a full frame picture, which out of photography is generally 6x4, 6 units by 4 units. You can set up your frames by using margins if you want. I'm slack. I'm just using carriage returns. My bottom margin is set into the font for my captions. And so then it's ready to go. So it just saves you that having to resize things. It doesn't matter how big that picture is, it will resize it down to the closest fit it can get into there. And so if you're using a standard 6x4, you don't have to, it doesn't change any aspect ratio, it doesn't crop, it just is exactly the way you want it.
What about the size of the photo? I find using my iPhone that the image size is so large, I have to reduce all my photos into a separate folder before I use them and then use insert photo.
Wow.
Wow. Okay, I'm using my iPhone. You let the photographs go in, assuming you're not shooting in RAW.
No.
And then once you've done that, you can do this. Will help you immensely. Is picture format.
Yep.
Compress pictures, and then go down and use a default resolution, and there'll still be a good photograph. And you can see I've expanded that image. It's grainy, but the image originally was grainy. It was a night image. I often will get somebody's report, and even in a PDF or as a Word file, I'll blow it up to look more closely at the image. I think that's pretty well a standard process. So let me do that. You know, I want to look at Neil's more. Well, I might want to crop that image out of the report. Easiest way for me to do that is just to crop it. And so he looks like a handsome fellow, and I'm thinking of putting his picture on my my dating site so that I can get more girls. And of course, I can't tell whether he's smiling or frowning because I'm working on a static document. But you know, I can still get a fair amount of expansion, and so you've got a lot of redundancy in the image, Vicky. Huge amounts. So yeah, save it. I had a young lass similar report to me the other day, and every photo was a portrait and A4, and at 140 megabytes, it took a hell of a lot to get it down to be able to send at 10. And that's that advantage. I take every shot that I can, and I've been doing it now for more than a decade, and it's in the manual that I wrote for TAFE. Taking things in landscape, even if it's a portrait object like a tree, makes sense. If you've got a portrait object like a tree and you want to take the whole thing, move back, take the whole tree, and then if you want, you can still crop it. The advantage of it in the landscape is PowerPoint presentations, in your documents, it just makes sense to be in landscape. You can fit 2 pages, 2 images, and at 2 images at, let me shrink the page down to 100%. That's still a clear enough picture that you can see without losing anything. So you don't have to have, huge images. You don't need to have, you don't want to have really small ones. Like here, I can see this as Neil's fairly easily. Here, that's hard. And it's just trying to find now, I might be wrong, and you might find that you want to do 3 photographs or 4 or whatever. You might want to turn the page the other way and do 4. That's whatever works, but try and get something that's consistent. Okay. And this is for your supporting images. In other words, this is not something to try and demonstrate something in the middle of the report. One of the things that legal report will have in it is it'll have a picture of concrete being cracked and lifted, so that when I'm communicating to an insurance person, they can look at it and say, yep, got that picture now. Okay. Use images and graphics as much as I can to communicate. So getting back to that, this part of the report is about exactly that. I'll put a picture of a tree in. Let me open a tree picture up and literally put one in. So I'll put one in from a site today. I thought it would anyhow. Let me do that a different way. Well, I can. I'll just do it. That's fine. Copy. Okay, so if I'm putting a picture in, what's the purpose of the photograph?
Communication.
Yeah, but to whom? Who's my client now?
The lawyer.
Well, okay, in a school report, it's going to be...
Oh, the school report.
It could be the GA, it could be the school where it's something really important. A lot of the time, it's just a picture of a tree and they don't give a damn. Who really is going to care about the picture more than anybody else?
The arborist doing the
The
work.
arborist.
Arborist doing the work. Okay, so because the arborist is doing the work, I know that arborists aren't always well educated, is a grey box, never the Latin. Because I'm figuring I've got a better chance of communicating with a large basal wound. Now, in this case, it's a monitor applied at council, but it could be remove tree, grind stump, plant a new tree on site. On site's bad. It should be on the site. No, not clear enough. The school grounds, because an arborist might say to you, is this site where this tree was? No, on the school grounds. Now I've got to, you see how I've got to dumb things down? It's got to be, and grind the stump. No, because I've got a full stop there. That's an and, it's not an and there, and there. Grind, it should be grind the stump. And so that is purely for the arborist. And in that photograph, I've got to think about, along with an aerial image, with the marking of where that tree is, will he be able to find it? So, can he find this covered outdoor area? Can he see this roof line in the building? So I'm always thinking again, when I'm taking my photographs, what's in the background that'll help give context? How can someone get to that same general position? Oftentimes we're focused on the tree. And then the last thing you might want to do if you're taking a photograph and putting it in is you might want to adjust it or manipulate it. And again, the purpose of manipulation is not to make something there that it shouldn't be. But the basal wound, 2 grey boxes. Maybe the arborist is not that bright. I'll probably have an arrow in there showing something. So there's my arrow. At least we know now it's this one and not that one, so we don't get the wrong one cut down. And it's the way you've got to think, you know, because this is, and so the reason we give not only what the tree is and a context in the image, but what they've got to do is, because this is where the arborist is probably going to be looking, and he doesn't want to be going from the back of the report to the front of the report, from the front of the report back to the back of the report. He just wants to go through, and where it says monitor the tree, he says, that's not my problems, that's the consulting arborist. He just wants to know what practical things he's got to do, what sort of tree work, pruning, whatever. Does that make sense? So you've got 3 target audiences in the one report. The same information is being given 3 different ways just to help them get it. How much longer does that take us to do? About half an hour in a report. Because you end up finding standard phrases. You end up standing, you know, I guarantee you, if you're in the inner city part of Sydney and you're in a school, it's going to be camphor at least 25% of the time. So, you know, 1 in 4 will be Cinnamomum camphora, Camphoral, Cinnamomum camphora pasted in. The most common thing that we find in schools, dead branches greater than 10 centimetres in diameter. But if you're in the western suburbs of Sydney, you see a lot more cavities. And so again, you have your standard phrase for cavities and so on. And then because you don't want it to sound the same, you need to be able to alter it. Otherwise, the person reading it's just going to start nodding off to sleep. So how do you alter it? Well, we could say remove dead branches greater than 10 centimetres in diameter. We could say remove branches 10 centimetres in diameter and greater. We could say remove dead branches larger than 10 centimetres in diameter. You see how you can say the same thing in different ways, and they weren't all identical, by the way, before you pick on me for it. But yes, being able to express things differently. You don't want to have the same word used ideally twice in the same paragraph. If it's a non-standing, you know, and the, you're going to use them. But if you've used grind stump, you don't want to have grind ideally twice in that paragraph, or certainly not twice in the same sentence. You'll almost always avoid it because it gets repetitious. And it's like when you're driving, and you know what I'm talking about if you've been driving, and everything's the same, you're going along, and then all of a sudden you get to the stage where you think, oh, crap, I want to go to sleep. Has everyone been through that process? That's what reports can be like. And, you know, I certainly am not a good writer. So I've got to work at that. And that working at it means going back over a document like this. So I'll do an edit through, and then we have somebody after me go through and redo the things and change things out, take extra words out, remove things around. So when the document finally goes out, it's as close as we can get to what we want. And those of you who's using Grammarly now, Vicky is. I know Peter is sort of not using it very often. It's just so good.
No, I'd use a word processor that doesn't support Grammarly. But one that I do use does a spell check for me, and I just limp along with the grammar that I make up myself.
And look, there's nothing wrong with that. Again, each of us will have different levels of English competence. You know, I admire those people. My father was one of those people that had beautiful written style. Could always manage to pick the right words and just make the sentence and the paragraph flow. It's not something that I was gifted with, so I have to work at it. And that's a reality. Probably 10 to 20% of the time that I spend on a report is that process of editing it after I've done the first draft. The first draft will often require probably, again, 10 to 30% of the time But I'm working on that draft, refining it and getting it closer to what I want as an end product. So it's the only way we can do it and get there. Now, there's got to be limits on that. And the limits on that, of course, is we've got clients that are paying for us. We have to, that's the advantage of getting your templates done, is the template component is largely sorted out. So, you know, everything, and we tell the client, it's a little standard insert. I'll just go up to it so you can see it. The critical stuff that they need to be is in the first 4 is highlighted. That means that it's going to be changed. At the moment, it's in the first 4, but it could be in the first 3, it could be in the first 7, depending on how big the report is. And so it's everything after this in the location plan is going to be included. And after that, that just explains everything in far more detail. And that's the bit that Sean the other day said, I don't want to try and rewrite it. It's just too hard. It's not hard by any stretch of the imagination, but that end bit there probably has taken me maybe 200 hours of writing, reading, refining, and getting it sorted out. It's good, but it's not great. I'm guessing by the time I've been at it for about 80 years, or when I'm 80, we'll be getting a little bit closer to it. And that will be because amongst everything else, software will be getting better. Someone will come along one day. It'll be I had a report a number of years ago that a law firm said to me, Mark, we'd like to discuss your written style. I said, yeah, fine. We don't want to talk about your technical stuff, but we want to. And we spent 2 days, a lawyer, junior barrister, and barrister, going through arguing about whether there were commas, where the paragraph needed to be. And I still use some of that report in my template to this day because they refine sections down so well and so precisely that it's made it easier to use. So every time you go over it, it will get better. Guys, we've gone past time. I have discussed with Peter that we may only do one either tips or next month. Which would you rather do?
Probably tips. I think we might have some subjects for discussion. I hope we've got.
I've already got a couple that have come through, Peter. So yes, that's great.
But you know, open to suggestion. If somebody's got some pressing urgency or something particularly interesting, we're always open and rely on you to come up with.
What date will that be? I'll be away from the 9th to the 23rd of June.
The 17th.
Month.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, we could do tips on the 24th.
We would normally have tips on the 17th and war on the 24th. I'm not sure
We could do tips on the 24th, Peter.
Yep, we could. If you want to forego our 17th of June day and only have the 24th, that's fine, and we can do tips on that day if you wish.
I've got a couple of trees with bracket fungus that we're looking at. I mean, I know you've probably done them to death, but
No, look,
I'm probably going to get a Picus test done on one of them. I've been dealing with the council today, so I don't know whether that's a good thing or not a good thing.
Oh, look, the Picus test is going to tell you what you should already know. And I mean, again, it might be good to get somebody like Hugh on and have see whether we can curtail him into answering questions. But I'm pretty sure that Hugh will tell you, and probably better than 95% of the time, he looks at the tree, looks at the fruiting body, and says, "Okay, I can draw this now."
Yeah, I've got him. He's going to do it for me.
Yeah. And so you're doing it for mostly to substantiate something to a consent authority or to make somebody feel happy with what they're saying. What we see is that stuff often overused, and Hugh will tell you that's great. I will tell you that's fine. But it's just crazy to overdo things. If I saw Philinus fruiting body on a Nicolay, I'd say it's probably not going to live much longer. Don't worry about it. Just figure out when you're going to get rid of it. If I saw Philinus on Mollicana, I would say it's probably not going to live much longer, and the Philinus will die.
These are on Botryoides.
Yeah, Botryoides like Saligna, generally they tend to respond fairly well as trees. You can get some more extensive decay, but you'll also get good adaptive growth because they're vigorous growing species. They can put on a fair bit of tissue fairly quickly. So
I've always wondered about the fact that if you do a picus, then you're looking at a particular part of the tree, and that's not the whole of the story. Trees will often fail because there's an issue with the roots. If you do a picus on the trunk, it doesn't really pick that up. You won't really pick up whether or not a branch is going to fail by doing a picus on the trunk either.
It's interesting, Peter. I got a call today from somebody who said, could he borrow my resistograph? And it's an arborist I know reasonably well. And I said, yeah, come on. And he borrowed it and did a test on a tree, but his boss didn't like it, didn't like the results. It's a 1.2 meter diameter tree, and he drilled through and he said there's 30 centimeters of solid wood. And his boss said, but you can see the opening, it's bigger than that. And so I said to James, where did you drill? And he said, to the wound, I drilled at 3 o'clock and 9 o'clock. I said, so yes, it's an offset cavity. And what would you do about that? The answer is nothing. It's just, on a tree that's 1.2 meters in diameter, it's of no consequence at all.
Except that now you've made a wound from the outside all the way in.
Well, it didn't breach the wall, thank goodness. And that's what his boss was upset about, is he expected that wall to be breached. But if you look at an offset cavity, let me see if I can quickly draw one. By virtue of the way it works, you end up with this area here at 3 o'clock and 9 o'clock, sometimes being solid all the way through, because wall 2 inwards stops at the pith. So quite frequently an offset cavity will have incredible holding wood at the sides here, and you look here and it might be quite a big opening even. It's irrelevant. And so it's a difficult one. And again, start keeping your eye open. How often do you see a tree fail at the cavity? Unless it's root failure, Peter, as you say, and that's usually not associated with Philinus. It's usually associated.
You wonder, what's the usefulness of, in a lot of cases, the usefulness of doing those picus in any.
There's a lot of use. Ask Hugh. Hugh will tell you that it helps pay for his retirement. But look, sometimes people need that 3D image to feel good about things, either letting the tree go or letting the
I understand where a tree's very badly compromised and you can't necessarily see as a non-tree person, you can't necessarily see the signs of that. Well, that will explain that there's virtually nothing left in there. You've got the bark and not much else, and that's why we have to take the tree out. Okay, I understand that.
I think the difference there, Peter, is you and I understand trees and have a fair visual picture of what's going on. For a householder, that may not be the case. For a consent authority, that may not be the case.
A lot of what I know about what goes on in trees is the result of some years of milling trees. And if you go out into the bush and laboriously chop down trees and drag them all the way home and then chop them up, and you find that, this little sign on the trunk means that there's a big whatever in there, and this whole thing's been a total waste of time and effort and money. You soon learn to notice those things, and so that VTA for me was really made work by milling the trees, by cutting them up and seeing what's inside.
And I think it's the same of cutting trees down. The only problem is, and it's a real issue with our practical arborists, many of them, they cut it down, they don't understand what they're cutting when they're cutting it down. So they don't even get that. It just goes through the chipper and goes into the back of the truck
Mm.
without saying, well, hang on a second here, what am I actually looking at and why? And that's why getting hands-on samples and having a look at hands-on samples and playing with them. You know, I had the displeasure of going to a school this week where a hoop pine had been cut down because the stems were splitting.
Hmm.
And by that, we assumed they meant it had 2 stems.
Oh dear.
The arborist was concerned to the point that a 100-year-old heritage tree was cut down based on what we call the SEP, or the State Environmental Planning Policy, because no other party was required to verify that. And so the arborist's belief was that tree had to go. It was a matter of urgency and priority. I couldn't see any splitting from the ground.